Welcome to our video about peatland restoration. How does it fit in with other land uses? How to get started? And what support can Farm Advisory Service offer to anyone interested? My name is Sera Erbanova, and I work at SAC Consulting in the Environment team. I am joined here by my colleague Tushani Naidu, and our great guests are Guy Cole, a project officer at Peatland ACTION, and Garance Wood-Mowlin, a Peatland Code Development Lead at IUCN UK Peatland Programme. Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Before we carry on, Garance and Guy, could you tell us a bit more about Peatland Action and Peatland Code and how they differ?
Yeah, so Peatland Action is a national programme to restore peatlands across Scotland. It's led by Scottish Government and delivered in partnership with the National Park authorities, so ourselves at Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park and the Cairngorms National Park, and Scottish Water, Forestry Land Scotland and Nature Scot. And there's also a government commitment to restore 250,000 hectares by 2030 as part of that.
Yes. And the Peatland Code is the only UK government-backed domestic voluntary carbon market standard for peatland restoration. And it helps companies become carbon neutral or negative and helps the UK meet the greenhouse gas targets. And its purpose is to create market confidence and trust.
Nice. Well, let's cover some definitions before we go further. So the main aim of peatland restoration is to rewet bogs or fens that have been dried out by either human activity or natural activity or historic land use. By raising the water level of the level of water table, the typical bog vegetation, mainly sphagnum mosses, starts recovering, and previously eroded areas of bare peat start revegetating. This is typically achieved by installing dams within drains, trench bunding by reprofiling steep edges or drains and gullies, and to create a more level bog surface to slow down the water flow. As a result, the peatland habitat improves. Higher vegetation and plant diversity provides shelter for many animals, from insects and birds to mammals. In addition to biodiversity, restored peatlands support water management in the landscape, improving water quality and quantity, and protecting the land from flooding. Peatlands are a significant carbon pool. They are capable of storing carbon for millennia if undisturbed. So they are very important for climate regulation. We should also mention cultural importance of peatlands and the iconic peatland landscapes that we associate with rural Scotland. At Farm Advisory Service, we have produced useful materials helping farmers, crofters, and land managers navigate the peatland restoration world. Earlier this year, we released a video we made with Peatland Action and Peatland Code at Flanders Moss, which goes into the detail of the roles of the two bodies in financing peatland restoration. We also deliver free to attend events across Scotland for anyone interested in peatland restoration, where we cover the basics and connect people with their local peatland restoration experts. We will link all the relevant resources under the video. And for our events, keep an eye on the Farm Advisory Service event page at fas.scot/events. Follow us on FAS Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, or Instagram to make sure you don't miss out on our content. Don't hesitate to get in touch directly at advice@fas.scot if you'd like to inquire about peatland restoration, and we'll make sure to connect you with the right specialist to give you the best advice. With that, I will now hand over to Tushani. Tushani, what did you prepare for us today?
Garance, Guy, Sarah, I'd like to invite you to play a board game with me.
A game? You have a peatland board game?
Exactly. Can you see it on your screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, indeed.
It's very colorful We've got different land users on this map here and corresponding tokens, which are the right buttons you see that denotes the values and benefits that come out from the land use that we see on this map. So at FAST, we developed this game to explore peatland land management to unearth local views on land use and visualize what an ideal future within peatlands would look like.
Wow, that's really interesting. It's got kind of a generic peatland landscape, isn't it? Looks like you've got some areas for grazing and some game, fishing, lots of different peatland conditions. So we can see some bare peat, modified bog, near natural, and even some land use, different land uses. So you've got timber production, you've got native woodlands, biodiversity habitats, town settlements, and you've even got mountains and incorporated the renewable aspects for wind farms. So yeah, very, very good looking board you have there.
Thank you.
Yeah, really good. But majority of it seems to be bare peat. So what does that mean? Does bare peat equal to degraded? Are you really saying so much of our peatlands are in degraded state? So yeah, can you just explain a bit more about what does degraded peatland mean and how do you even assess that?
Yeah, areas of degraded peat occur where the water table within peatlands drops to a level that is not sufficient to support the key bog vegetation, such as the sphagnum mosses. The vegetation cover can retreat, forming areas of bare peat that are then exposed to sun, wind and rain and start eroding and essentially disappearing from the bog, as well as exposing areas of bare peat. Lowering the water table can lead to a change in vegetation cover, which can lack the diversity of the original peat bog. And that's why we call it degradation, as it changes the original habitat and some of its functions and qualities are lost. So peatlands with areas of degraded peat can be in the form of peat pans, micro-erosion, hags and gullies, or lack peat-forming vegetation. And these would all indicate that the peatland habitat could benefit from a restoration intervention.
All right.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That was really informative. So let's get back to the game. Sarah and I have run this in Strathpeffer and Greenabat in Isle of Lewis, and we're going to take this opportunity to share our findings from the perspectives of the local communities.
Yeah, exactly. So the first round is what would a good outcome for nature look like?
Peatland restoration.
Yeah, that's definitely the best outcome.
I'm going to start moving some of these near natural tiles over to areas of previously bare peat.
Okay. All right. Wait, hang on. Can you actually have livestock on restored peatland, and how does it impact grazing?
Peatland restoration can increase vegetation cover, and this usually provides better grazing capacity. In some cases, farmers can claim higher payments through EECs, where the total grazable area has increased as a result of restoration. And also importantly, restored bogs tend to be more stable and can therefore be safer for livestock to track across.
All right. Oh, I didn't know that. So no more sheep lost in deep gullies then.
Wait a minute. But in our workshops, crofts mentioned grazing can be an active method to improve biodiversity of vegetation and facilitate restoration. I think we should put more grazing hexes too. What do you think?
Maybe wait just a second, because well-managed grazing can of course be very beneficial for maintaining peatlands in a good condition. And you have livestock and wild herbivores, and they can nibble on the heather, shrubs, and that keeps them keeps them shorter, which allows the sphagnum to then retain their dominance. But you need to keep an eye on the trampling, because that could be an indication that your stocking density might be a bit too high. So the presence of too many animals could in fact reverse your improved condition category or your condition of your restored peatland. And so if you register a project with the Peatland Code, you're eligible for income from selling carbon credits. And so you must ensure that your restoration is successful. This could mean that in some cases, you reduce your grazing pressure And hopefully from the lost income, that would be replaced with peatland code income. So I will actually be removing a grazing tile.
Okay. Yeah. Well, there are also commercial forestry on peatlands. Do you think this should stay? How does tree planting affect peatlands?
Well, commercial forestry on deep peat is a legacy of past land use choices, and today it would not be possible to plant trees on deep peat. And by deep peat, we mean peatlands where the average peat depth is more than 50 centimeters. And in fact, peatland areas previously planted with trees can be restored back to bog once the trees are removed, and we call this forest to bog restoration. Trees and commercial forestry are obviously an important land use with many benefits to local communities, but we should be careful to choose suitable areas for planting those trees. So I'm going to put some bog in good condition over a couple of these previous plantation areas.
All right. Okay. Well, I believe that woodlands are important. You know, the native broadleaf woodlands are important as well. They're good for biodiversity, but also important to heritage and Scottish landscape. Trees also sequester carbon, right? So they can be used to tackle climate change. So is there space to see more native broadleaf woodland creation? And I'm going to try and get some more trees here.
Well, as Guy already mentioned, planting trees on deep peat is not allowed, not even native broadleaf trees. It's not desirable either. The carbon benefits of trees planted on peatlands are much lower compared to trees planted on non-peaty soils, and often even results in more carbon emitted from the dry peat than is taken up by the trees. So in open peatland habitats, I'd actually recommend peatland restoration if they are degraded or appropriate management to maintain a healthy bog or fen habitat. So trees can be planted in areas that can support a more optimal tree growth. So perhaps we would like to maybe move some of those broadleaf tiles and actually move them across to here.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, and you also need to watch out for natural regeneration. So if you restore peatland near a tree plantation, you might start seeing seedlings slowly taking over your bog. So these have to be removed to maintain the hydrology and the right vegetation composition of a peatland habitat. So it's about the right habitat and the right conditions, because we want to maximize the ecosystem services that are being delivered. So, we're including biodiversity, good water quality, kind of drinking water and aquatic life, and also the carbon sequestration and carbon storage that goes with that. So I'm actually going to use some of these tokens, and I'm going to put, I think, carbon sequestration over a nice bit of bog and water quality and biodiversity. I'll stick there.
I like that there is like various benefits that come from restoration of peatlands. But Sarah, I also like that you touched on more values than just around nature, but we're also thinking about heritage and cultural aspects as well. People matter too, especially if you want to restore nature in a just and fair manner. Which brings us to another round. What would a good life look like in a peatland landscape?
It'd be with some good peatland restoration in it, I think.
Yep.
All right.
Peatlands.
I see where this
I think
is
you
going.
see the theme here.
Exactly. No, I quite like that. No, well, actually, hang on. We have to consider the well-being of local communities as well, right? So I understand that crofters on the islands traditionally practice peat cutting. So I'm gonna place the fire hex on some of these peatlands, because that's where peat cutting takes place.
Okay.
So this is still really important for them to heat up their homes, and especially when there is no alternative fuel available. So there's also strong traditional value to this practice. So how do we consider that?
Yeah, well, in the planning stages of a peatland restoration project, we work with the local community to ensure they don't lose these essential land uses and can carry on with practices that are important to them, such as livestock grazing or peat cutting in the Highlands and Islands. And while it's not possible to continue with cutting peat in a restored area, as it could hamper the efforts for that bog to restore back to its natural state, we would always do our best to work with local stakeholders to identify where the active peat banks are and designate areas for ongoing peat cutting that fall out with our restoration project area.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. It is important to recognize that peatland landscapes are integral in the sense of place and histories of communities living within them. How is local knowledge and expertise included in the plan and design of peatland restoration?
Well, in the Peatland Code, we require project developers to complete a consultation with any kind of relevant stakeholders. And this ensures that the local community is being consulted on and they can input into the restoration plan. It also allows them to raise any concerns they have. But we put a real emphasis on the historical value of peatlands and the archaeological deposits that they might find. And so we expect a healthy and successful peatland restoration project to be one that has input and includes the local community.
All right. Yeah, it's so important, isn't it, to make sure that the local community is involved. While we're considering local community, we also have to consider their livelihoods, which is obviously integral. Peatlands, as we've already discussed, are an income source as well. So they support grazing, and in turn, they support the livelihoods of the local communities. But there are other income from peatlands, such as peat extraction, for example, for whiskey production. I'm gonna place a few whiskey tiles here.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yes.
obviously that is an income, but
Yeah.
also the funding Peatland Action provides for peatland restoration projects covers the capital investment. So this can be a very important income for rural communities, supporting local workforce from project managers to contractors, and it helps to retain a skilled workforce in these rural areas. So the peatland restoration itself, I think, does help provide income. So I'm going to stick some of these tokens on some restored areas also.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yes, and let's not forget the Peatland Code can also generate income, and that's through restoration. So I'm going to also add some income into some peatland here. So while public funding is very important to drive the nature restoration that's required across the UK, I think it's estimated that about £560 million is needed to be spent on the UK's degraded peatlands, and that's quite a lot. So the Peatland Code, I guess, exists to help bridge some of that funding and close that gap to attract private finance into peatland restoration. And so it allows that blending of public and finance, and it works really well with the likes of Peatland Action.
Right. Okay. So I'm just wondering, is there a minimum area size to be eligible for either Peatland Action or Peatland Code funding?
Well, in general, for Peatland Action is able to fund projects that are over 10 hectares and the cost of the restoration exceeds £10,000. However, as funding becomes more competitive, projects that deliver greater benefit will likely be prioritised. And this year, you may have seen that Nature Scott introduced a competitive funding process for their projects. Within the national parks, however, we're not currently running a competitive funding system, so we're happy to discuss smaller projects, and we don't have deadlines for applications either.
Okay. What about Peatland Code then?
So there are no real prescribed requirements for the size of the project, and however, the size will impact the economic attractiveness of using the Peatland Code, since there are costs associated with the process. So in Scotland, many of our projects receive Peatland Action funding, and so would generally fit that criteria that Guy has outlined.
That
Okay.
sounds really good. Yeah. Oh, what's the cost like to apply for Peatland Action and Peatland Code?
So for Peatland Action, we don't charge for application submission, so that's completely free.
That's good.
Yeah, same with the Peatland Code. We're also free to register with us. There will be costs associated to validation and verification, and also there is a small charge per carbon unit issued to the registry. Possibly additional cost if the landowner decides to go with a project developer. You might also have to pay for that.
Okay, well, that's really useful to know that and to understand all the implications. I can see also our map, obviously we've added the income tokens, which kind of really nicely shows now that there is income available from peatland restoration. So yeah, if there is funding to support peatland restoration, and there's also potential income streams to support the ongoing management, then where do I sign up?
Yeah, so for Peatland Action, it's worth checking the Peatland Action web pages on the NatureScot website, as there's plenty of good materials on there. And if you're based out with the national park, then you can contact the NatureScot Peatland Action team, and they'll put you in touch with a project officer who's based in your region. And if you're based in either of the national parks, then you can contact the Peatland teams at both national parks directly, and we'll be able to discuss potential projects.
Great.
Yeah, and for the Peatland Code, similar, I would recommend having a look at our website. We've got a very detailed step-by-step process on how to get registered. There are some criteria that projects just need to meet to make sure they're eligible for the Peatland Code. And once that's been achieved, then you can register on the UK Land Carbon Registry and get in touch with one of us at the Peatland Code team. So that's peatlandcode@iucn.org.uk, and we'll be more than happy to help you through that process.
Nice. That's a good note to end our session today. Thank you so much, Guy Gerrans, for sharing your time. It was a really informative session, and I think it was great that we got to explore some perspectives that we heard from our workshops and to address those in this webinar. Well, we hope you enjoyed our video recording on the basics of peatland restoration. If you want more information, you can contact the FAST team or get in touch directly with Peatland Action or Peatland Code. All contact details will be provided down below. If you'd like to play our Peatland board game, don't hesitate to get in touch with us as well. Thank you.